Welcome to the podcast, Guidance with Gab. Learn and unlearn all things wellness. Today, I wanted to welcome Nathan Peterson, an author, songwriter, overall artist, who also does some speaking events, which I heard and were really moving. You have a story that, when I read it, touched my heart. It made me emotional. I started tearing up, and I just love your message. You're also a course creator who focuses on themes of love, faith, healing, and hope, which are all my kind of themes. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to be on your podcast.
So I found you on Tiny Buddha, and I read your blog, I guess that's what it's called. So I read it, and then I was immediately by it. So I did my fun little research. I started listening to some music, also great. And it all stemmed, a lot of it, from your story. So I wanted to give you the platform to share the story that you have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and of course, the part that I share the most is just a small segment of what I call my story. But
yeah,
the post that you read was about my daughter, Olivia, and she was born in 2015, and we found out before she was born that she wasn't supposed to. She had a genetic condition that made her incompatible with light, and so what they prepared us for was to say goodbye in the operating room. Wow. And that was maybe half of the pregnancy, so 3-4 months.
Wow.
Of them just knowing that was coming, going through kind of a certain track that they had for people in our situation to prep us. And up until that point, it's almost as if for various reasons, a lot of my self, I think, has been kind of frozen during my life. And up until that point, I was feeling a lot of that ice starting to crack a little bit and melt a little bit. This situation sort of just really accelerated the cracking and melting.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of things that I did in my life that kind of kept me frozen. A lot of it around work, or just around which is part of work, but around my idea, my story about myself that I needed to be able to tell. And so part of that had to do with being an artist and all this. But when even just the news about Olivia came, we really had to just put everything down. And there was a point this is still during the pregnancy, but there's a point where I really felt a fork in the road, where I could kind of double down on my decision to on that story that I needed to build, on the narrative of this is who I am, and I'm accomplishing great things in life, and that could actually be a way for me to cope with this news that we have received, and in a way would help kind of protect me from really feeling it all the way.
Yeah.
And the other road, which seemed a lot more narrow, was to actually be in that situation. And the situation was one of those calls that you are always afraid of getting, like someone I love is going to die, or I'm going to die, or those kind of, you never want that news, and you're always afraid of it. And so we had the call, we had the news, and so I felt that fork, and I think a lot partially because of the cracking of the ice that was already happening in me. And then partially because of the reality of the situation, which was she may not survive birth. She probably won't survive birth. So this is your chance to know your daughter is like in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to know her at these sonograms and so I felt like I have to choose to go down this other road.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of medicating these feelings of fear, and I mean terror, I'm gonna have to be willing to feel them in order to be in the space to know my daughter for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made that choice. My wife also made that choice. And um, believing that probably we'd say goodbye to her in the delivery room. And so we just lived this very surreal, intense, very painful, and very scary few months leading up to her birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was born, and she didn't die in the operating room, and she almost did, and she almost died on a regular basis every day for
Oh my
a
goodness.
long time. So it was a very challenging. Seems like a glib word, but it was a challenging time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that fork in the road, like it kept being there, like every moment it was like another fork, and we had to keep deciding, like, okay, well, if she's only gonna be alive for 3 days or 1 day or one with this first hour, or 1 month, then if this could be it today, what's my posture gonna be? Like, am I going to medicate, or am I gonna be just in this and
Mm-hmm.
feel all of it?
Yeah.
But it was really clear that if we didn't want to miss her life, we had to feel everything about those moments. And so that was just it was a daily, sometimes hourly choice that we made for, she lived for 14 months.
Wow.
And beautiful 14 months, also really challenging.
Yeah.
But we got to know her, and at the end of her life, we really, the very first thing I said to Heather after she passed away was, we did it. It really felt like victory. It felt like, I don't know that we could have done it another day, but we stayed with her in that space of uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
for the whole journey.
Yeah.
And I was just filled with so much thankfulness, just so much gratefulness that we didn't miss her life.
Mm-hmm.
Also very tired and exhausted.
Yeah.
So that's one leg at least of the story. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
much story you want.
Well, it gives me chills just listening, and I wish I was there because I want to give your whole family a big hug. But you said so many that someone in your situation coming out feeling thankful, feeling grateful for, overcoming everything. You mentioned that you knew before she was born. How do you think that changed, like, the grieving process? Like, were you grieving while your wife was still pregnant?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you define grief as feeling loss, we were feeling loss as soon as we got the news that something about our life would be different than the way we thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I think the grief started immediately.
Did you have like you individually and also with your entire family because you have other kids as well.
Yeah, we have four. We
Wow.
had three at the time. We've had one since.
Wow. Okay, congrats. Um, so how is it managing the entire family and everyone's emotions? Like, did you guys have, I don't want to say tools because it sounds very surface level, but did you have like certain discussions or practices that you did to go through it fully?
Yeah. We had we had a good marriage counselor, which I think it's 95%, they say, of marriages and where, oh, I think I can fix the light here. That might be a little better. 95% of marriages where they've the parents have lost a child end in divorce.
Mm.
And I don't know what the timeline is for that, but I'm guessing based on our experience, probably within the first 2-3 years after the loss. Thankfully, we already had a counselor, a marriage counselor, before any of this even happened, and he was incredibly supportive. So we had some tools there. Then there was a hospice counselor who started meeting with us as soon as we were put on this track.
Mm-hmm.
Also very helpful. But I think that, like you said, the word tools it's such a square word for such a non-formed, this formless experience.
Yeah.
It's such a finite word for such an infinitely deep experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the thing that we needed to come back to was probably less of what feels like a tool and more like what feels like a posture.
Mm.
And the posture opened us up to different resources in different situations.
Yeah.
But the posture, I think, was rest. I feel like, when things, I guess anything unexpected happens, I feel like we go into a mode that speeds us up,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I guess a form of panic or fight or flight. I guess that's that term. Um, and I think the opposite of fight or flight response would be the response of presence or rest.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really important for us to um, not move ahead even to the next minute or hour, definitely not the next day or month,
Mm-hmm.
but to really, really tangibly come back to just the moment that we were actually experiencing.
Yeah.
And that cut out like 99% of our experience, because so much of our experience, not just ours, but all of ours, is our thoughts about things.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a physical, tangible experience of 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 feeling the feelings that come from those thoughts. And so, in a way, my thoughts actually do create a huge percentage of my experience of life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start to come back to your senses and maybe let less of the thoughts, um, things simplify so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like that thing I'm worried about tomorrow is literally doesn't exist,
Yeah.
except for that I'm thinking about it. And so for us with Olivia, it was like, okay, thoughts say we have a terminal daughter. Thoughts say she's going to die. Thoughts are wondering what I'll say at her funeral. Thoughts are wondering how old she'll live. How disabled will she be if she keeps living? Thoughts say I'm exhausted. How am I supposed to make ends meet? How are we supposed to work? All these thoughts are there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry because, whatever. And the senses are like, Olivia's alive. She's not dead. You have a living daughter. And those senses kept communicating, your daughter is alive, over and over and over for like a million moments for 14 months. While the thoughts were like, she's going to die, she's going to die, she's going to die. And so I think that was, if we had a tool, that was probably the most useful one, at least for me personally.
Yeah.
Just coming back to the most narrow version. It's not really narrow at all, actually. It's almost like it starts by narrowing your focus, and then you come to this one moment that seems really small, and then you realize that it goes like infinitely deep. So like, I thought I was narrowing my focus, but actually I was deepening my experience.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the most important processes.
It sounds like coming into your feelings and into the experience versus into the thought. And I've been talking about that with people that I've just had on the podcast. There's a difference between analyzing the feelings and trying to make sense of the feelings and trying to understand the feelings, and then feeling the feeling. Like, those are two separate things. And something else that you said, I'm a Reiki practitioner. So usually when I have clients, I feel different things and have insight that I feel like I need to share with them. Or one of my previous clients, she came to me and had this one problem. And within that one problem, she started creating with her mind another problem, and another problem, and another problem. And to me, it was this picture of almost like a web. Like, there's one problem, and that's all she needs to focus on is let's attack this one problem. But instead, there were 10 legs coming from it that were all from the mind. It had nothing to do with the actual problem. It was things in her mind that were just creating things because the thoughts take control, and then we think they're feelings, but instead they're just worries based off of a thought that we created. Now we have 20 problems instead of one problem. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. And you said something, you wrote it down. I had to write it. Rest is not something you do. It is something you are while you do what you are doing. And I had to read that probably like 5 times. And he just makes sense of all the rush and fast-paced lifestyle. And he just put it into one word, what we need to do. Like, I don't need to do rest. We are doing so many things all the time. And sometimes even resting feels like a task. I don't know about you, but something I'm like, I know I have to schedule my rest. Like, the rest is that like state of mind and that feeling. You react to the feeling versus the thought. How do you like describe that? Like, how do you advise someone to get into rest versus new rest?
Yeah. I don't feel qualified.
You have the experience, so maybe just from your experience.
Yeah. I've so because I probably wrote a couple of books, I've transitioned a little bit to do speaking now in addition to music. And when I go to speak, it feels funny because sometimes I'll speak at a conference and there's other speakers and I'll be watching them speak and it'll be so much better than me at this. Like they knew what they were going to say when they got up there. They had it all mapped out. They delivered it perfectly, punchlines. And for me, leading up to a speaking event, I purposefully, I purposefully don't plan or script my talks. So I step on the stage and then I try to take in the moment and then I just breathe and let voice kind of start to form some words and we see where it goes. And it's been beautiful, really, really beautiful, terrifying leading up to it. But that path of leading up to it, I think what I'm learning is that path is a great opportunity for me to grow. I mean, to first of all, to not make it all about me being on stage, because I don't know what I'm going to say. But two, to practice what I'm just about to talk about. Like, and it came because this will all come back to an actual answer, but I do this daily walk, and on my walk, it's kind of part of my practice to go on this walk and to let go of as much as I can in order to create an open conduit for new moments to flow through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's maybe a better way to say it, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
And on one of these walks, I was thinking about, I'm going to speak at this conference. There's going to be a lot of people there, and it's in like 2 months. And I'm like, what am I going to say? And even if I tried not to think about what I was going to say, like in the back of my mind, I'm like creating my talk.
Right.
And even not just creating the talk itself, but creating the moment itself. Like, actually, what am I going to look like, and how are people going to respond? And it's not even like trying to ask the question as much as almost try to like anticipate it. Like if someone was going to punch you and you're like getting ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels a little like that on my body, even like I'm tensing up, preparing for this thing that's going to happen. And at some point, I was consciously thinking about this talk, and I was like, what am I going to say? And I started kind of just going through what I might say and starting to make an outline maybe. And as I was doing it, I realized I've walked by so many beautiful things on this walk, and I've not experienced them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm literally imagining giving a talk to a group of people about not missing their own life while I miss my own life.
Mm-hmm.
So if I followed this logically out, where as a leader am I already leading these people?
Mm-hmm.
If a leader goes someplace and then everyone who's following the leader goes to the same place, when I get on that stage, I'll be regurgitating something that I thought about 2 months ago while missing my own life about not missing my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll probably be super impressive, and they'll all clap and they'll be really happy about what I did. I'll probably have delivered, because that's probably why they showed up at the conference, was to get a certain feeling from these talks. And everyone's going to be happy, except we'll all have missed the whole thing. And I led us there 2 months ago by missing these beautiful trees that I'm just walking by while I imagine, how am I going to look in front of people in 2 months? And so that moment, I decided I'm going to commit to coming back over and over and over from now until I get to that point, coming back to where I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start now, and I'm noticing there's a beautiful tree in front of me. This air is cool, and breath is flowing through me, and even in the last couple of seconds, as I started to notice where I was, the breath started flowing in a different way. And I'm feeling that. And just coming back to some senses and noticing how my body starts to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And starting to really take in the colors and the lights around me. And I think that my intention on that particular walk was, this is where I want to lead. In that moment, most likely, there will be a room full of people. We've been separated at that point, it was even closer. We had been separated from each other for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're together in a physical space, breathing together. I want to lead us into that moment rather than into my ideas
Mm.
And the only way for me to truly do that is to be in this moment now. And so that just became a practice leading up to this talk, and then really a practice leading up to any of the talks that I've been doing, and concerts, really. And so all that is a long answer to say that I think a really helpful way for me to find the posture of rest rather than the doing of rest has been to come back to where I am in a very tangible way.
I like that answer.
And I happen to be, I mean, because I'm a singer, I've done a lot of reading and learning about breath. It's the vehicle for the voice. And so that's been a really beautiful redefining of what breath even is over the course of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a vehicle for my voice. Now I think it goes a lot deeper than that for me now.
Yeah.
So when I stand in front of these groups and I'm supposed to help us to find a posture of rest, usually what I'll do is I'll just invite them to, I'll talk a little bit about the anatomy of the breath, how the diaphragm works.
Mm-hmm.
I'll point out the fact that in modern culture, almost 100% of us are in a very shallow, habitual state of breathing.
Right.
And then talk about how a baby breathes who hasn't been programmed yet to breathe in a controlled way. And talk about the health benefits of what happens when you breathe autonomically rather than in this kind of habitual controlling way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll give them some tools to actually try to play with that and to invite their body to back into some autonomic breathing.
I like that goes so hand in hand with being in the body and being present also. I just had on a somatic breathwork practitioner, and all she had to say was, sometimes with my students, we take a deep breath, and I'm sitting here and I took a deep breath and I'm like, oh, I feel so much better now. And I'm such an advocate for breath work because it's just changed my life in like just significant way of being in the body and breathing. I feel like it changes my mood. It's just made me so much more aware, even when I'm not doing my dedicated breathwork practice. When I'm throughout the day, I'll catch myself like, okay, breathe, like take a proper breath. You're doing the shallow breathing. So I wanted to say, I'm sure the people in the audience or the students at these conferences appreciate that type of energy showing up. Because, they've paid for someone to come talk, but I'm sure they hear the same type of conversation. Even if they're saying different things, if it's said in the same way, it's like being talked at versus talked with.
Yeah.
And when someone is really present with you, you feel that. If I'm paying for something and someone goes on stage and I'm all about like, just like my full self everywhere I go. So I'm not much of an explainer either, more like, we'll figure it out if they like me, they like me. No, but if I paid to go to an event, I would want someone to feel like they're talking to me and talking with me, and we're having that kind of conversation versus the cookie cutter kind of, this is how it's going to be, and I'm going to talk at you and tell you all these things. So I just wanted to say I was very much appreciative with, I'm sure, terrifying, starting up. So like, we'll kind of see what happens. I'm sure you will obviously have like a clue of what you're going to talk about, but it also sounds very intuitive, because sometimes I think I was a yoga instructor as well, this one, but I would have an idea. This is as so the same, but I would go into a class with kind of a plan of a theme and what I want to talk about. And then you pick up the energy of the room and you're like, I feel like they need something else right now. Like I came in here wanting to theme about forgiveness. And all I'm feeling in this room right now is letting go, or all feeling is love. And who am I to try to put my box of ideas onto people that I feel like don't, that's not what they need right now.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a really, I don't know, is that a conscious intuitive thing, or is it just kind of happen to be also an intuitive practice for you when you go up there?
It's yeah, no, it's conscious. Definitely intuitive.
Mm.
I think at this point in time, I don't think that anyone in our culture is needs to know any more stuff. So these conferences, I think conferences, they've existed for a long time, and I think the method has been information delivery. And we're delivering information to saturated human beings. So to me, my intuition says, probably there's something in us that feels more comfortable when a speaker or a leader of some kind says the things that we're already expecting to hear. And it feels so good that I'm willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it's not almost as if, I think probably a lot of people spend a lot of money to go to conferences or read books to hear things that they already believe, but don't trust themselves enough to accept and need someone else who's an authority to say it for them. So I'll pay for that,
Yeah.
And I don't totally. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good. They're trying to kind of legitimize a sense that they're having. The problem is, and they'll just keep doing that until they finally listen to the voice inside. So my theory is, why not, in theory, I don't know if it's the right word, but what I've been exploring is, as a speaker, what if instead of going on stage and sharing any information, I make space for this group of people to listen to the voice they came here with this voice. Like, they didn't come here to hear me. They came here to hear something that they already know.
Yeah.
They just need the space and the support to connect with and to fully listen to. So I think that's been kind of my intuition around that.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because the past few months I've been having this feeling of certain health things coming up, and I'm running to Google when I already know what I need intuitively, or because of the things that I study Ayurveda. So I have the tools, but it's looking outside of myself for this validation, which then invalidates like the trust that I have for myself and my intuition. So now I've implemented, like, you already know. Don't look. You already know. So you don't need to find answers. And you've mentioned the reprogram, or the programming of the breath. And then you mentioned the overload of information. And that's partially why my podcast is called Learn and Unlearn, because there's so much learned behavior that I think maybe is not helping us right now. And what do we need to unlearn? Like, what do we need to shed? We're always trying to like receive and take and input, when I think a lot of what we need to do to receive answers is not look, but to shed and to unlearn. And then we're going to come back to ourselves and come back to this like core knowing and this core being that we have. So when we start unlearning and unprogramming ourselves and shedding all this, all the information we have, and we have all the answers, because now we're listening to ourselves. At the end of the day, we do know. I love that you talked about that.
Yeah, I love that picture. When I go on these morning walks, the picture in my mind of what I'm trying to do is really similar to that. Um, I think I'm wondering if maybe we're not so much like a pond or a bank or a storage facility, that you fill up as much as you can until you die and then you bury it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're a conduit. And if, and maybe even we're actually not the conduit itself, but we're what's flowing through the conduit. Like our deeper self is actually flowing through the conduit. So if we do the work that you're describing of like, I'm shedding, we could almost picture like I'm changing my the way that I treat myself from this thing that's supposed to accumulate stuff, ideas,
Mm-hmm.
identities, to this conduit through which life can flow.
Mm-hmm.
And that life is, it's me. Like I'm that life. Like I'm an expression of that life for my lifetime. That feels like such a different way of living life versus like I sort of get an idea of who I am because maybe my parents gave me a compliment that just like really hit me when I was small, and then like I I sort of like start latching onto that and adding to it, and I build a career around it, and I make friends around it, and I think about myself around it, and I buy things, and I become a consumer around it, and until I'm 80 years old, and I've accumulated these sticky things that all stuck to this kernel of a compliment that I got, or something. But I just wonder, like, what you're describing is more like my work is to let go in order for what's alive now to flow through. And that means if I start this walk today, I always do my walks first thing. And I've kind of had this picture of like, I don't even know who I am today in a way. Like, can I let go of just every single thing that's behind me, like from yesterday, so that this whole day in front of me it can just flow through this big open tube and express itself however it wants to. Anyway, that's what
No,
I'm hearing you kind of describe.
I like that visual. That's how I picture just like life in general and being in this body is like being dropped off. Like my soul is somewhere in there, and like all of what I'm meant to do and like the lessons I came here to learn. And just like ripping off these pieces that people put on me, and then coming back home and finding my true self. I thought of an interesting story that I haven't thought of in a really long time, but you were speaking, and I remember my parents, maybe my mom, someone must have got me earrings, butterfly earrings, butterfly something. And I remember my mom said, I don't even know if she actually thought I really liked them or she just wanted the other person to feel better, but I remember she said, oh, Gabriella loves butterflies. And I was there kind of like, jiggle. And then from there on, it was like a butterfly thing. Like I had butterflies on the wall, and I had butterfly, just so many butterfly things. When that was never really mine, I never had this thing for butterflies. It was my mom said something to someone, and now, oh, that's a part of my identity. And that's such a small fraction, small little, okay, that one's funny for you because butterflies, I've outgrown it. Okay. But if we think of all the other things that are like butterflies, personality traits, you are this way and you act this way, and it can get so foggy. Because now it's not just butterflies, it's personality traits, it's identities, it's ways we're expected to behave and act. And now, oh, where did I go? I've now uncovered in all of that. And I lost myself. Hmm.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting thing that I thought about when we were talking about that.
Yeah. I think so many of us, our whole life becomes that butterfly picture.
Mm-hmm.
Now we don't, once we know, I think things can and maybe almost have to really change unless we like try hard to ignore that we know.
Yeah.
Before we know, it's like we're in the matrix, like we don't know we're in the matrix. We're just, it's just all we know.
Yeah.
And it almost, to me, I feel, maybe it's a hammer looking for nails, but I feel like as a culture, humanity even, I feels like we're entering a season where we're becoming aware.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
agreed.
We kind of know, but that's not actually me. I'm living someone else's picture of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it gets, that can be a very uncomfortable realization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's been manifested in all kinds of painful ways in our world.
Yeah.
But maybe this is just me being optimistic, but the night gets darkest before the dawn. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, this last few years has kind of felt like our it's been there's been some dark moments over the last few years, but it feels like we're like it's the dawn. We're starting to wake up.
Yeah.
And while it's uncomfortable, it feels really, really exciting.
Yeah. I think the universe, this is just my belief, but isn't going to do something so drastic unless it needs to. And kind of how I picture COVID, because that was the most collective experience. And I feel like maybe the universe felt or saw this connection between people and cultures and everything, just creating separate bubbles of people. And we needed to come together. Even though physically we couldn't come together, I feel like the universe was asking for like a level up, like, get it together. You guys need to work together. I've always had this thought as a kid, even of, I hope I can explain this well, but I won't like you because we live in a different city, right? But then if someone out of state comes in and we're going to join up, even though we don't really like each other, like the person out of state, and that just grows bigger and bigger. People in America, going from Jersey versus New York, might not get along, but if something is attacking America, we're all going to join together.
Yeah.
And the way I saw COVID was that big thing coming in for the whole world, saying, hey, it's your time to all say, whoa, let's fight against this. But
yeah,
I think it did help that scenario that I have in my head. I think people did lean into that, but there were also the other sides where it was, you are anti-mask, you're pro-mask, and it also caused these separations. But I'm hopeful that in the long run, because again, this is so brand new, so there's still a lot of time that we need to see how the effects of it is carried out on a deeper level besides like the physical. But I do have hope that it brought some light and maybe woke people up, slowed them down, allowed them to be in their homes, be with their families, realize what life is very short. It can be like, look at the world right now. Maybe I want to be more selective of how I use my time. So I am optimistic too. I'm thinking that it caused a change in the right direction.
Yeah. I felt a lot of very parallel experience happening when COVID came to our experience just a few years before with our daughter. We had to quarantine. We had to stop working. and then eventually we had to try to keep working, but not leave our house. I couldn't leave town because I didn't want to miss like every day. It was like this might be the last day,
Mm-hmm.
and so we were looking at death a lot, which generally we try to avoid that. Um, and then COVID came, and I was like, oh wow, the whole world is quarantining. The whole world is not able to do their work the way they were used to doing. Having to figure out money in a way that like doesn't have to do with jobs. Sometimes like having to kind of let go of the whole system,
Mm-hmm.
and having to be with ourselves. Like when you're busy all the time, you don't have to deal with the deep stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
the longer you sit still, the more that deep stuff is like, okay, like, hey, now that you're here, like I'd like to
Yeah.
talk to you, and there was, I think, a lot of that for the world, just like, you know, not getting to be busy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was nothing to be busy with.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of anger got a chance to come to the surface.
Yeah.
Not uh, in a lot of unhealthy ways sometimes, but um, I view COVID as a accelerator for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that way about Olivia's life too. Um, like I said, I think the ice was cracking before she was born. But she definitely accelerated a process that was happening in me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think that the ice was cracking before COVID, but it definitely seems to have accelerated uh, our, well, like one of your words that we use in our grief, with our grief counselor, we use the word deconstruction, reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
What was your word?
I said unlearn.
Unlearning and learning. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We had accelerated unlearning during COVID. I think.
Yeah. I think busyness is the perfect avoidant technique. If you want to avoid anything and justify it in a way that's acceptable, well, I'm busy. I can't do anything. And that for me also was the time when I woke up because I was the busy person, I would throw myself in every activity I could. And then there's no more activities and I found myself even a bit, maybe it was still COVID that hit. I'm not sure, but I remember I would sit at this pond and just like cry. And it wasn't this crying because I'm sad necessarily, but it was this like dreading of,
Yeah.
oh gosh, you're actually feeling your feeling and you're letting them go and you're processing them. Versus in the past when it would be, oh, I feel a feeling, but I have to go to soccer. I have to go to class. I have to go see friends. I don't have to do those things.
Yeah.
They're just, I feel like unconscious coping mechanisms to avoid feelings. And then when I did start feeling them during COVID, it it was that like gen and that breakdown of my old habits. And it was really nice to stop being busy and to be with myself. And I could see how that brought up so much anger for people. You're finally with your feelings and now you have a shit ton to deal with.
Yeah. Right.
It's just a pile on. If you don't get them while they're fresh, they're just gonna pile on. They don't just go away. They get stuffed down, but they're not being released or transformed. They're just stuffed down.
Yeah. And eventually, either in your own lifetime or maybe in your next generation or two, eventually it'll get too much
Mm-hmm.
to cover up anymore, and it has to come out.
Yeah.
It's almost like I don't know. I pictured you sitting by that pond, and the tears were coming, and it kind of felt like there's a young girl who has been there But anytime that she calls for attention, you're like, I've got to do this thing. I need to do that. In my experience, it's like almost aggressive, like, shut up. Like, that's stupid. You don't need that, and just kind of this very dismissive.
Yeah.
And this young child is like, oh, I'm asking for attention. Like, I'm sad, or I'm angry, or whatever it is. I think there's it's uncomfortable, but it feels so necessary to make space for that child to just be heard.
Yeah. I'm actually creating I'm almost done with it, but an inner child program, because that is what sparked, my inner child healing journey, realizing that so many of my behaviors are rooted in my childhood that I just never let go of. And I was noticing it in other people. And what you pictured is kind of like reparenting, being myself and feeling my feeling and not saying, okay, whatever, just that's not important. I'm not going to validate that. That's silly. Why are you crying over that? But I'm going to now, as the wise adult who I am, going to be with the child that is within me and say, you can feel your feelings. That's fine. We're going to sit here and we're going to cry, and that's fine. I don't want you to cry. I want you to feel your feelings, because when it's out, then it's okay. And yeah, that is exactly what it was. It's the image that you pictured is truly what it was. It was so many versions of me crying. It wasn't Gabby at, I don't know how old I was, 22. It was Gabby at 5, Gabby at 10, 15. It was all of those people just overwhelmingly like, oh gosh, we have to get out now. And then when I finally gave y'all the safe space, it was okay to cry and realize, but I needed to say these things, not being pushed away and on the busyness to feel. So yeah, if anyone needs you, I just love, I have you. It's getting to almost an hour, so I have this question that I ask everyone that comes on. If you were standing in front of the entire world and they're all paying attention, listening, that's interesting because you are a speaker. What would you say?
Whole world is listening. Just like one sentence that I get to say.
Whatever comes to you.
I would say you are already here, meaning you're already where you've been trying so hard to get to. And it's okay to stop trying and to be here now.
I love that. You're already where you're meant to be. You're already here. You don't have to keep looking and trying to find something when it's within us. Yeah, really nice. Where can people find you if they want to? I know you're an author, musician. There's so many different things that you do. So where can people find you?
Yeah, just my website's the easiest. NathanPeterson.net. Not com, but net. And for music, I'm on all the platforms, and for books, I'm on Amazon. But yeah, come find me on NathanPeterson.net. And I have a newsletter. That's sort of my closest community. And I send a newsletter once a week, and everything kind of flows from there.
I'll be signing up for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll link it underneath so people can find you a bit easier. But I wanted to say thank you for coming on and share your story and share your thoughts and allowing this conversation to go in fun, weird, and wrap around ways. Like, thank you.
Yeah, it's been really nice. Thank you.